Yo ho ho, Bills Mafia. Welcome to a long-awaited edition of the Dom Mafia Show. As always, your host, Dan Mitchell. I took a bit of an off-season myself after that heartbreaking loss in the playoffs, but really just after seeing all of the news that has been breaking, not across the NFL, but also at One Bills Drive, I had to cut my off-season off, baby. I'm back, and I'm ready to give you that sauce. So yeah, no surprise that a bomb was completely dropped, that Leslie Frazier has decided to take a year off from coaching, but plans on returning in 2024. Now, frankly, I think this is complete bullshit. I think after those past couple of playoff losses, I'm sure you remember, like when we ended up having DBs lined up like 7 yards off some of the fastest receivers in the face of the planet, we all wanted his job. Right? I feel like most Bills fans and most of the organization in general. However, it was a really interesting way of going about it. I think that McDermott had just so much respect for Leslie Frazier that it was almost more so like a forced resign. Basically being like, hey man, why don't you just say that you're going to take a year off, and then afterwards we'll just sort of part ways. We're going to roll the dice and see how our defense ends up doing without you. That's neither here nor there. The Buffalo Bills currently have a vacant defensive coordinator position right now, and in this video, I wanted to discuss a couple of potential options that I think would make the most sense. And I'll also end the video with who I think needs to be calling plays for this team regardless. And so, but before we get into that, I just have one announcement. Smash the ever-living out of that like button. His number one is probably going to have to be Eric Johnson. He's currently the defensive line coach. He's had a long history with Sean McDermott in Carolina. Spent a couple of years as a defensive coordinator. And in my opinion, this isn't the sexiest move. I think the only reason they would want to go this route is the fact that he is just very familiar with how Leslie Frazier ends up running a defense. Yes, I thought his defensive line looked better, but soon as when Von Miller ended up going out, I mean, we're talking a generational defensive end, the QB pressures ended up completely spiraling downhill. I'm not the one to blame a coach entirely when it has to do with personnel, but I wouldn't be too excited about this move. However, I do see where the coaching staff and where the front office would be keen to at least consider this guy for an interview. His next option would be Al Holcomb. We did just end up bringing him on as a senior defensive assistant right around the same time that Leslie Frazier decided to step away for a year. Now, this guy would be pretty intriguing because not only has he had 2 shots at defensive coordinator, one in Arizona, and then last year with the Carolina Panthers, once Matt Rule ended up getting fired. And we can talk shit about the Panthers as much as humanly possible, but you can't deny that their defense did end up playing very, very well. And no disrespect right to Carolina, they do have some very good players, but with the personnel that he would be able to inherit over in Buffalo, I think that this would be an interesting move from the Buffalo Bills going into it. And so Al Holcomb would definitely be an interesting fit. Yes, I know he doesn't have a lot of familiarity with how we run defense in Buffalo, but with how it's been going, I think a change would be welcome. So next up would certainly be a wild card, but this guy has head coach experience, he has defensive coordinator experience, and while he's never really donned one of the top defenses in the NFL, he is known in getting the most out of the players that he has to his disposal, and that just so happens to be Lovie Smith. I think that the Buffalo Bills front office would definitely want somebody that has a lot of experience, not wanting to sort of dip into a pool of inexperienced candidates and bringing somebody in here that could attempt to make the best out of what we currently have. I think Lovie Smith would be somewhat interesting, but not too excited about that either. So now it comes down to who I want to be defensive coordinator, or rather, who I want to call defensive plays. And hear me out. Sean McDermott. It was just a couple of years ago when Leslie Frazier was struggling tremendously, and there was a couple of games where Sean McDermott ended up taking over play calling entirely until he was comfortable enough to hand it back over to Leslie. And from what I remember correctly, Sean ended up calling tremendous games. I know a lot of people are just going to be like, Dan, he's got a lot to worry about. He's the head coach of this organization. I think that there's really no harm in putting him in that role. It's not like a head coach has not done that in the past. And when he was at Carolina, he was a great defensive coordinator, right? His defense was absolutely lights out several of the years that he was there. He knows this team. He knows his personnel. And so he knows how to get everybody on this organization to play their best football. My only reservation for this guy is that knowing us, we're probably going to go heavy on defense in the draft this year. And McDermott's never going to give any snap to a rookie whatsoever. Thank God Kyer Elam's going to be a second year because we might actually see our first rounder on a regular basis. However, I feel like the best possible move, hands down, is going to be Sean McDermott calling these plays. But I do want to hear your thoughts on who are some of your favorite candidates that could take over the position. I think as Bills Mafia, we're just happy that we're going to be able to have some sort of fucking change throughout the past couple of years, and then maybe we'll be able to get the most out of our guys. Because let's be honest, our defense is not going to look the same personnel-wise. It's either we're going to have Edmonds or we're going to have Poyer. Looking like it's going to be more so Edmonds. Say that we get either of them. So there's definitely going to be a lot of struggles. There's going to be a lot of youth on this defense. I'm not foreseeing us being the same unit that we were the past couple of years, but I'll get off my soapbox. Regardless, Bills Mafia, thank you so much for tuning in to yet another edition of the Dom Mafia Show. Make sure you smash that like button. And before I let you go, you better always remember, let's go Buffalo.